to the Nerdstalgic Podcast with your host, the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm.
Howdy Beans, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the Nerdstalgic Podcast. I'm your host, Luke the Human. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're all good. As per usual, before we get into today's episode, I want to do with housekeeping because I like to keep my house nice and clean. So, 3 things I want you to do for me before we get into today's topic. Number 1, if you could follow me on Twitter at nerdstalgic_pod. Number 2, if you listen to this on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And finally, number 3, if you're listening to the podcast on Spotify on your mobile phone, don't forget to leave a star rating of 1 to 5 stars. So if you do all 3 things for me right at the beginning, I will be eternally grateful. So today, I'm going to be continuing my journey through the Blue Sky Studios movies. Today, we're going to be talking about the 2015, underrated in my opinion, animated classic, The Peanuts movie. I got a bit of trivia here for you. So in the US, this movie is called The Peanuts movie. But here in the UK, the movie has a different name. So in the UK, it's called Snoopy and Charlie Brown, The Peanuts movie. Now, I Googled as to why. See, I knew there was a difference because whenever I speak to any of my friends in America, they would say, oh, yeah, the Peanuts movie. And I went, no, don't you mean the Snoopy and Charlie Brown movie? And they're like, no, the Peanuts movie. So I had a bit of a Google, and it turns out, right, so the Peanuts movie is called Snoopy and Charlie Brown, the Peanuts movie in the UK. Apparently, distributors in the United Kingdom decided to add Snoopy and Charlie Brown to the US movie title of the Peanuts movie as a marketing technique to have more of a name association to the characters. And again, my theory to this, and I'll talk about this in a minute when I talk about my sort of memories of it, is the fact of the Peanuts movie, the characters, it's not really a thing here in the UK. It is more of an American IP, recognized characters. We don't have Charlie Brown's Christmas or Charlie Brown's Halloween. I know a lot of my American friends, that is a staple of every Halloween, every Christmas, they will watch those movies. They're never on here in the UK. It's not a thing here. So I could understand as to why of like people who are going to recognize anything to do with the Peanuts characters, it will be Snoopy or Charlie Brown. More than likely, it will be Snoopy because Snoopy is just an icon. He's like Mickey Mouse. He's just that recognizable, like the Minions. I'll give more sort of up-to-date example. He is that sort of recognizable as a character. Like it makes sense as to why they would put Snoopy and Charlie Brown in the title. But I'm going to stick with the Peanuts movie because it's a lot easier. It's less of a mouthful to say. But I thought that was an interesting bit of trivia that I wanted to share with you all. So as for the movie's synopsis, life always seems complicated for good old Charlie Brown, the boy who always tries his best against seamlessly impossible odds. When the little red-haired girl moves into his neighborhood, Charlie Brown develops a crush on her. Meanwhile, his best friend Snoopy embarks on an epic adventure in a fantasy world. As a World War I flying ace, the lovable beagle pursues his nemesis, the Red Baron, who also is trying to win the heart of a beautiful poodle named Fifi. So that is the synopsis of the movie. As I mentioned, like memories, I like to do sort of time where I talk about sort of my memories of this film. I've seen this film a couple of times, and I wholeheartedly agree. It's so good, so well done, incredibly underrated. Like it's one of them films that like nobody ever talks about. Whenever they talk about Blue Sky Studios or some of the best animated movies in the last few years, this film never comes up. I have no idea why, because it's incredible. It's funny, it's silly, it's quirky, it's beautiful, good themes, good characters. Everything about it is just incredible, really. And it's a surprise to me too, because like I said, I live in the UK. Snoopy, Charlie Brown, Peanuts, they're not staples here. It's not a thing here in the UK. As far as I'm aware, especially growing up anyway, it was never a thing. Maybe generations before me, possibly, but it was never a thing that was always on TV. Like even if you look at like Sunday papers, you'd get Garfield like cartoons in the newspapers and stuff like that, but you'd never get any Charlie Brown cartoons or not even on the TV. So I don't know as to why I gravitated towards this movie so much in 2014, but I remember when it was announced and I got really excited. And when it came out, I didn't go to see it, but when it came out on streaming, I was just like, I've got to watch it, and I just fell in love with it, and I watched it multiple times. And it was one of those movies that when it came out and it was highly available, I said to everybody who I could find, like, have you seen the Peanuts movie? You've got to watch the Peanuts movie. And it's like, Luke, you're in college, calm down. You're meant to be doing computer work. But I know, but it's a good film. And I remember trying to talk to my friends and talk them into watching it, but I don't think any of them ever did. But I don't know why it gravitated to me so much. I just watched it and I was like, this is really good and very clever. Why is nobody talking about it? Why is it feels like it's just me? And it probably is. I'm probably like one of the very few English person that actually really enjoys this movie. I'll be honest with you, I'm not going to lie and say, I went off and I bought loads of Charlie Brown and Snoopy memorabilia and stuff like that. Like, no. It did. The bus stopped at the film, but for a long time, it was just one of them of like, I need more people to see this film. And I've seen it a few times as the years gone on, and it still holds up. It's still fantastic. It's so unique and so different. And not just because it's the Peanuts movie, but looking back and bringing it back to sort of Blue Sky Studios, when you look back of all the things that they've done, and like they made like loads of Ice Age sequels up until this point, and they were made like Rio 2, which we did sort of the last movie that we covered. This was probably one of the first ones that they've done in a long time where it felt different, where it felt unique, where they was able to stretch, instead of doing Ice Age or we're doing Rio again, we're able to do something different. Kind of like on the lines of like Robots and Epic and that sort of thing. Where it's like, we want to tell a different story. We want to do something different. We have now been given an IP, a license that's very well known and very well loved and respected. Let's try and do something with it. And yeah, everything about it, I just remember the animation was gorgeous, the storytelling was good, it was funny, and you had moments where you had the group, you had the Peanuts group, and then you had Snoopy and the Red Baron, and he was having his own little sort of adventures and stuff like that. Of like, I don't know, 2015, I remember watching it while I was in college and being like, look, this is one of the best animated movies I've seen in a very long time. So I'm so excited to watch this and to review it, because it is a very special movie. And again, I can't explain as to why it pulled me in, because again, British, it's not popular here, but it just did. I just fell in love. So so I'm looking forward to talk about it today. On to sort of the production. So again, I've split it up into development, animation, and I want to talk about the music, because I feel like the music is what makes the Peanuts characters and what makes this movie. So starting off with development. So in 2006, 6 years after the release of the last original Peanuts strip, as well as the death of the creator, Charles M. Schulz, his son Craig Schulz came up with an idea for a new Peanuts film, which he showed to his screenwriter son, Brian Schulz. Quote, I was happy to show my son, end quote, Craig said. He showed me how to make it bigger, how to blow it up more, and he helped me put in structure. When presenting their film to studios, Craig stipulated that the film remain under Schultz's control, saying, we needed to have absolute quality control and keep it under Dad's legacy. You can't bring people in from the outside and expect them to understand Peanuts. On October the 9th, 2012, it was announced that 20th Century Fox and Blue Sky Studios were developing an animated feature film based on the strip, with Steve Montanio directing from the screenplay by Craig Schulz, Brian Schulz, and Cornelius Uliano. Craig, Brian, and Uliano also produced. Craig stating that there is no one more protective of the comic strip than myself. Chose Montreo as director because he showed faithfulness to literature in his adaptation of Dr. Seuss' Horton Hears a Who. If you've heard my review of that one, you know how absolutely I love and adore that movie. So it was a good decision to have him on, because he did such a faithful job with that adaptation. Again, in my opinion, but obviously Brian and Craig sort of saw that as well, which I'm really, really glad. And probably one of the reasons why it's so good and so faithful and so great to the characters. But anyway, moving on. As the film's plot, Martino said, here's where I lean thematically. I want to go through this journey. Charlie Brown is that guy who, in the face of repeated failure, picks himself back up and tries again. There's no small task. I have kids who aspire to be something big and great, a star football player or a Broadway star. I think what Charlie Brown is, and what I hope to show in this film, is the everyday qualities of perspective or perseverance, even to pick yourself back up with a positive attitude that's every bit as heroic as having a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame or being a star on Broadway. That's the story's core. There is a feature film story that has a strong dramatic drive and takes its core ideas from the strip, in addition to receiving the rights to use Bill Mendez's voice for Snoopy and Woodstock. Martino was also able to get the rights to archive music from previous Peanuts specials. Classic locations are featured, such as Charlie Brown's skating pond, his house, the wall, and Lucy's psychiatrist booth, each retaining their eternal look of the strip. Additionally, despite being outdated technology, rotary phones and typewriters are seen, as well as Lucy's psychiatrist booth still costing a nickel. Adult characters, wah wah, I feel like I did that correct, wah wah, voices are represented by a trombone with a plunger mute, as in previous Peanuts media, courtesy of New Orleans jazz musician Trombone Shorty. Because of the robust number of existing Peanuts characters, the film does not introduce any new characters. On January the 8th, 2013, Lee Ann Brodsky became the managing director of Peanuts Worldwide and was set to control all the global deals for the film. In April 2013, Fox announced that the film would be released in 3D. In October in 2013, it was announced that Paul Feig would also produce. By April 2015, 75% of the animation was complete, with some footage scheduled to debut at CinemaCon in Las Vegas that year. So that is the development. Pretty good, smooth development to us. And I just wanted to mention how I love the idea that they took their dad's IP and they wanted to be so protective over it, and they wanted to make sure that if they was going to do it, they do it right. And they did, and they chose a fantastic director, because again, he was so faithful with Dr. Seuss, Horton Hears a Who. I wish Blue Sky did more Dr. Seuss stories. I would have happily seen them do an animation version of Cat in the Hat. You all know how much I love the Cat in the Hat. I would love them to do the Grinch, Green Eggs and Ham. There's an incredible TV show, Green Eggs and Ham, on Netflix, by the way. It's incredible. But I would have loved to see more Blue Sky Studios, Dr. Seuss things. Sadly, we didn't. We got the Lorax by Illumination, which I will cover one day because I love the Lorax. What Illumination did was incredible, but sadly, we didn't get any more. But I'm glad they got another chance of doing another faithful adaptation to screen of a well-known IP. So I just wanted to mention that. As for the animation, Martinio and his animators spent over a year looking at Charles M. Schultz's original drawing style to help translate the hand-drawn warmth into the cool pixel precision of CGI, without the fear of something getting lost in translation, such as how the dot of an eye, joy or sorrow, so effectively. While the animators try to translate the 2D characters into the visual aesthetics of CGI animation, the characters are animated on 2S, more akin to a stop-motion film than the usual traditions of computer animation, believing that its low frame rate stylization was more compatible for the technical needs to fit the style of Charles Schultz's work. So let's give you a background on the animation. As for the music, like I said, I want to talk about the music because the music here is just flawless. It's incredible. In October 2014, it was announced that Christoph Beck would score the film. Beck stated, "With the Peanuts movie, I grew up on those specials from the 60s and the 70s that, of course, rerun to this day. I'm very fond of all that Vince Gulad music. So what we did was try to find spots in the film where we could sort of touch down and remind people who were watching the film that it's still a Peanuts movie and that there's still a place for that music in the film. There's a bunch of spots where we quote the Garland music, or we actually re-record his pieces quite faithfully." He also added that the score would be more orchestral than Gulad's previous score. If I'm butchering his name, I do apologize. which were mainly a small jazz combo. Jazz pianist David Bennett contributed to Beck's score. On July the 28th, 2015, it was announced that Megan Trainor would write and perform a song for the film entitled Better When I'm Dancing. Epic Records released the soundtrack album on October the 23rd, 2015. So just want to talk about there with the music, because I loved the idea that, again, it goes back to that idea that what I was saying earlier about faithfulness, of like taking an IP that's already there and trying to be as faithful as possible, because they like I said, and he mentions it himself in that quote I just mentioned, they still do reruns to this day of the Christmas special, of the Halloween special. I've sadly never watched them, but they are on the list, and I would like to cover them and watch them one day. But they're still reruns. So there's going to be fans out there. There's going to be people that grew up with it. You've got to be faithful. And again, I know it's strange for me to say this, because again, I have no real physical reference, because again, I've never watched the movies. I didn't grow up with it. But from what I can see, and being a lover of animation and being a lover of movies, my interpretation is they nailed it. It's incredibly faithful. The characters feel like the characters should. The characters sound like they should. The art style and like the look of it and the feel of it, everything, you can just feel the authenticness. Even if you're not aware, you just can get a sense of there was a lot of love here, there's a lot of pride here, and there was a lot of wanting to make sure that they are as faithful as possible. They tried to be faithful with the animation. They tried to be faithful with the music and the soundtrack. They try to be faithful with the characters, the way everything looked, and to be faithful to the memory of Schwartz, really, of his work, of everything that he has done all his life until sort of he passed away. So for that, it just makes me love the movie more, in my opinion, because they just have such a love for something. And I've said it loads of times. It doesn't matter how good you are at something. You either be great or bad. If you have a love for it, if you have a passion, that will shine through, and that people will come for that passion. It always translates. Passion and love and care always translates. No matter what language you speak, people can just tell that you love something just by the way that you sound and the way that you emote. And it's so well done in this film, and I just can't wait to get into watching it. So I'm done here in the introduction. I can't wait any longer. I'm going to go off and watch this movie. You ain't going to wait that long, a couple seconds, and you'll have all my thoughts and feelings in a minute. But I'm very, very excited. So I'm going to go off, watch Snoopy and Charlie Brown, and I'll see you all in a minute. Hello on Z. Do you like jazz? Wait, no, sorry, wrong movie. Couldn't help myself. Could not resist. So I've just finished watching the Peanuts movie, and honestly, first impressions is it's incredible. It's absolutely underrated. It is a hidden gem, and I don't say that lightly. Generally, this is a hidden gem. I was watching it and I'm sitting there thinking, why is nobody talking about this movie? I had that full nostalgia from like 2015 came flooding back to me, and I'm sitting there smiling, giggling, and I'm laughing, not heartedly, but I'm a little giggling to myself, enjoying myself all the way through. There's not a moment where I wasn't sitting there and wasn't going, and it just baffles me that this is not a film that is so widely talked about. Whenever people say, oh, what are some of the best animated movies of the last, say, like 10 years, and this movie doesn't always come up. It's never one that people mention, not even in like the top 10. And it's a shame, because it's funny, it's unique, it's special, but most importantly, it's goddamn faithful. I did a bit of research while I wanted to look into this after I'd done the introduction. And I looked at some of the old comic strips, and I watched clips from the old movies from the 80s, like Charlie Brown's Christmas and the Thanksgiving one. And I just was baffled by how Blue Sky, and again, this doesn't even feel like a Blue Sky's movie film at all. Considering what they've done before and then doing this, it's completely different. Like, if you didn't know it was Blue Sky, you wouldn't know. That's how good it is. To be honest, it's on another level. But what Blue Sky was able to do by taking what was on the page and what had been done previously in sort of hand-drawn animation, back in the day, and do it so faithfully, but with a modern spin on it. And I just, not just because it's faithful to what it looks like, but I have never seen anything else that looks like this before. And it's one of those where it's like, I'd love to see movies done in this art style. Not, obviously I know copyright and all that, but what I mean is the fact of how they've done it and how it looks is so unique. And I could probably imagine as to why that's why the Peanuts comic strips were so popular and why they were so beloved by so many people of all generations, was just because it's so unique. There was nothing possibly out like it at the time, and there currently isn't, and I was just baffled, and I still am. I'm still flummoxed. I'm using such big words because I'm that sort of confuzzled that it's like, whoa, I can't believe that this movie was from 2015. It looks like it was made yesterday. It's like fine wine. It's aged so perfectly that it's like, if you told me this movie came out yesterday, I would believe you 100%. It still looks gorgeous. It's one of them rare sort of animated movies that, as the years go on, and again, the same can be said for the Christmas movie, and the reason why people watch like the Thanksgiving film and the Christmas film every single year since they came out is because they still stand the test of time. They still look great. They're still great, and I really want to watch them for Christmas. I probably still got time for Thanksgiving, I think, maybe. I don't know. Probably not, but we'll see. Depends on when this review comes out. But I do want to watch them, and maybe even we'll look into and reviewing them. But they stand the test of time for a reason, for memories and nostalgia, and just because of how much love was put in them. And it's the same here as well. This will stand the test of time. This is one of those films that, as the years go on, it will be looked back on fondly as a movie that just is ageless. It's like Keanu Reeves. Like, no matter what, it doesn't age. It is a vampire. This movie is just incredible. So, like, first impressions straight out the gate, I'm in awe. As for the story, so this story, it sort of explores themes of self-esteem, friendship, and confidence. As Charlie Brown learns that if he just bees himself, then people like him for him, and that's that, really. And it's kind of a journey through Charlie Brown trying to impress the little red-headed girl, but by doing so, he shows us some of his best qualities: that he's brave, and that he's caring and understanding, and that he would do things for his sister and his friends, and he's just a good all-round decent bloke, and that he quickly realizes that he doesn't need to be anything or anyone other than Charlie Brown, because his friends love him for who he is. Yes, he may struggle at flying a kite, and he always fails, and yes, he might not be the brightest bulb of the bunch, and yes, he might not be sort of the most handsome bloke, but you know what? He's Charlie Brown. That's who he is, and he owns it, and his friends love him for it. His dog loves him for it. Everybody loves Charlie Brown, and he quickly realizes, because again, he has low self-esteem. He puts himself down all the time. He's got a lot of sort of, there are a lot of moments where he's like, I can't do this. I can't go up in front of a stage of people and do magic. I can't dance in front of people. But the story uses the little red-headed girl, the new girl that's just come to town, as a way of getting Charlie Brown to come out of his shell, for him to show that he is brave. He can do things that he never thought possible. And even Charlie says himself, like, he learns to dance. Snoopy teaches him how to dance. And I love Snoopy, but we'll get onto that in a minute. Snoopy teaches him how to dance. And you have this moment where he even says himself of like, look at me, Snoopy. The old Charlie Brown would be at home pretending to have a stomachache, but here I am at the dance. I've made cupcakes. I'm ready to impress a girl that I like, but at the same time, I'm ready to do something that old me would never have done. So as you go through the story, there's a lot of moments like that where Charlie Brown just learns self-esteem. He learns that he's loved by friends and everybody around him, and it is a very wonderful story. And it's fantastic that we have story beats like this that young children are starting to notice. And I've said this many times in looking through Blue Sky and other animated movies I've looked in. When you have themes like this, when the idea that the main character has not a lot of self-esteem, it puts themselves down all the time, but quickly learns that there's more than meets the eye, that they can be bigger, they can be grander, they can be greater than who they are, what they are, and that no matter what you do, as long as you're kind, decent, brave, honest, people will like you for that, and people like you for who you are, and that you don't need to be anybody else. And these are sort of lessons that are really well needed to be learned at a young age, because the earlier you learn them, the more sort of confident you feel in yourself, the more unique you'll be to yourself, because everybody's unique, every soul's unique, no one person is born the same. And so if you realize that at a young age, then you'll go through your life of like, I don't care if I'm weird, I don't care if I'm different, I don't care if, there are times when every now and then I just like to do a little jig and dance a bit. That's my little personal USB. That's my personal thing. That's the thing I do. That's just what makes me Luke. That's what makes me Charlie. That's what makes me Sarah, And that's the key, really, is of teaching young, impressionable minds at a young age. It's okay to be yourself. It's okay to be different. It's sometimes, and actually not even sometimes, I would say, me personally, I would say it's always good to be different and to be weird and wonderful. Look at me. I'm weird. I'm wonderful. And I own it. And I absolutely love it. But yeah, I talk about beans, and I'm mostly known for beans on the internet at this point. But you know what? I own it, because you know what? Beans are awesome. I like beans. Beans can basically goes with anything. And it's different. Everybody else is going, hey, how's it going? I'm so and so. And I just go, howdy beans. And you'll remember the howdy beans more than you remember the bloke that just says hi. So basically, be yourself, be unique, have a lot more sort of self-love, self-esteem, self-worth, and people will gravitate towards that. And you'll find that the people that gravitate towards you will be your people. So don't pretend to be somebody you're not, because you'll attract the wrong people. So if you be yourself, if you be weird, be wonderful. If you like rocks, I like rocks, but if you're that type of person that likes to collect rocks and smooth rocks and quartz and crystals and all that kind of stuff, you will find people in this world that also like to collect rocks. You know what I mean? Like, you will find it. You've just got to be open to it and be honest with it and wear it on your sleeve and not give a crap what other people say or think. That's the long and short of it. And to have this lesson being taught here in this story to a young, impressionable audience, to me, is a fantastic thing. And I am glad that we have movies like this that can tell this sort of stories. And again, I know I tend to go really deep with these sort of things, and like sometimes it's not that deep, but it is, because you've got to imagine, as adults, we're listening to this thinking, no, it's not that deep. But to a kid, and again, it happened to me loads of times growing up watching Iron Giant, for example. If you listen to that review, you'll know that at a young age, I wanted to be brave and to be sort of be bigger than I possibly could be. You are who you choose to be, and I choose to be me. You know what I mean? And it's little things like that. Like, you might not notice it now as an adult, but mean a hell of a lot to a young, impressionable mind. It's those little things that we learn from a very young age stick with us and kind of builds the foundation of who we are. So you might sit there and go, Luke, it's not that deep. But trust me, to a young, impressionable mind, it's incredibly deep. It's as deep as any ocean will go, And I love that. I absolutely do. I adore it. So that's kind of the long and short of the story, really, is that Charlie Brown is trying to impress the little red-headed girl. And as he goes through the story, he quickly learns of what he's capable of, who he is, and what kind of person he can be if he just believed in himself a little bit more. And then he quickly learns that his friends love him for who he is as well. And that's kind of the long and short of it, really. Obviously, it's very wonderful. It's very silly, very creative and interesting. There is one part that my bookish brain really, really enjoyed. Charlie Brown decides to write a book report on War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. I've never read the book. It is on my list of books to read, but I have read I have read Les Miserables, and it's one of those where I've read a book that's over 1,000 pages long, and there is a part in that book where, for a good chapter or two, it is just descriptions of the French sewer system. So I know long-winded books. I know how long it is to read books, but it kind of tweaked my bookish brain because it was honourable. It was like very sort of like, that's known as the world's biggest and world's hardest book, and he finished it within a weekend, and he wrote a really good sort of book report, book theory on it, and which what I do with write my book reviews as well. So I could kind of sort of connect with Charlie Brown at that moment. And then just before he gets to show it off, in classic Charlie Brown fashion, it goes wrong and it gets completely shredded. And it was just one of the moments of like, I haven't read that book, but fair play to him. I know it's a cartoon, but you know what I mean? Like, it's one of those little connections you've got of like, I'll read that book one day. It is on my list. It's not what I'm looking forward to, mind you, because again, it's meant to be the longest book because it is about war and peace. But it was one of those little things. When I noticed it, I was like, yeah, fair play to you. Fair play to you, Charlie. I'll get there one day. I just got to have a bit of self-esteem in myself, a bit more Dutch courage and a lot more books I've got to read before I get to it because it's going to take me forever. Anyway, we're not here to talk about War and Peace. We're here to talk about the Peanuts movie. One thing I wanted to mention as well, kind of connected to the story. So you've got sort of the main story of Charlie Brown trying to impress the girl, as I mentioned. But you've got the side story. Now, one thing that I love so much about Blue Sky Studios, and they do this, well, they're the only ones that actually did it the best and actually did it regularly, was that in nearly all of their movies, and most definitely Ice Age, you'd have like the main story of Ice Age with the herd, and then you'd have Scrap, the little squirrel, and he'd go off and he's trying to get his nut, or he would try to bury his nut, or he'd be on some wacky side quest somewhere in the background. And it was like an interlude of like, you've seen a bit of the story, now for a bit of a funny comedic break, and then we'll continue with the story afterwards. And Blue Sky was kind of the studio that did it frequently. Almost every movie of theirs had one moment like this, and I really enjoy it for that. And it's one of those things that I love about them the most. And this is no different. So while you've got Charlie Brown doing what he's doing, you've got Snoopy in the background, basically with a typewriter, writing out like his magnum opus, where he's writing the story where he is the flying ace, and he's going against his most dastardly nemesis, the Red Baron. And I'd happily watch a whole movie of this, and I really think it would work. Best example, the Minions, Mr. Bean. The Minions are so widely loved because they are such an easy character to digest. They look good. They very unique, very easy to draw. Again, you don't even need to do a lot of detail. You just need to do literally a yellow bean with an eye and some straps and some blue overalls. And that's why they're so marketable and why they're so widely loved, because there's not a lot to them. And again, one of the special sort of USBs about the Minions is the fact of they speak every single language. So there's a bit of English in there, there's a bit of French, there's a bit of German, a bit of Spanish. And so everybody can enjoy them. You don't have to understand what they're saying to like them. Again, akin to Charlie Chaplin and silent comedy. And this brings me on to sort of my next example, Mr. Bean. Mr. Bean never talks, but he's widely loved around the world, and everybody knows who Mr. Bean is, because it's that idea of comedy is there's no language to comedy. Everybody finds something funny. It is one of those rare few art forms that no matter who you are, where you are in the world, funny is funny. It's as simple as that. And the Minions are funny, and Mr. Bean's funny. Snoopy, same sort of thing. He doesn't speak a word of English, but you know if he's happy, you know if he's angry, if you know he's sad, you know what's going on. So I think it would work. A whole movie, I would watch it. Probably the only one who would, but I would watch a movie of Snoopy as the flying ace, going against the Red Baron, trying to save Fifi, his love interest, as he flies around. And full on sort of war story as well, where, he's going on trying to fight down the Red Baron, and then you've got this like moment that's like where he crash lands in a battlefield, and he's trying to dodge searchlights, and then it cuts back to like Snoopy because he's in his little imagination world, and he cuts back to Snoopy in the real world, and he's there sort of doing Metal Gear Solid sort of Snake Hunter, shimmying on like Christmas tree lights and things like that. And you got one of the characters, I think it was Peppermint Sally. She basically goes, Chuck, your weird dog's doing it again. And it's like, well, he And it's things like this where little moments of just comedy, whereas like you have little chuckles here and there. Like my biggest chuckles actually came from Snoopy. You do get your little chuckles here and there when Charlie Brown and his story, but the biggest laughs from me came from the Snoopy side sort of quests, the side missions, the side story of Snoopy just being Snoopy. Again, no words are spoken, just sounds, noises, but you know how he's feeling, and you can relate to him. And it's really weird to say that because he is an animated dog, but trust me, you can relate to him, you can understand, and you just, yeah, it's great. And again, nobody else could have done this any better than Blue Sky, because that's what they've always done. Really, they've always done these side stories, these side quests in pretty much all of their films, and they were the best ones to do it. And so when you have this here, where you've got this completely different side story going on, but it works so fluently and it fits in so well and organically. It doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel like, oh, they just was like, oh, it'd be funny if we did a side story with Snoopy. Let's just like jam it in. No. It generally flows so well that, you know, you enjoy your story with Charlie Brown, then you get a bit of Snoopy, then you're back straight in with Charlie again. And it doesn't feel like you were away from Charlie for too long, and it doesn't feel that you was with Snoopy for too long. Everything just works seamlessly, that it's so good and so enjoyable. And again, this comes back to what I say, this movie is so unique. You don't see movies like this much, you know, and I haven't seen a movie like this, and not just because it's Charlie Brown, but generally the way this film's done and animated, and it's just the way this film is. It just makes it so unique and special, and why I say it's such an underrated gem. Yes, it's a kids movie. Yes, it's a Peanuts film, but that doesn't matter at the end of the day. Comedy is comedy. A good product will last forever. And this is just an underrated gem. I love it. I really, really do. Then the art style is unique. It's gorgeous. It will just stand the test of time forever and eternity. Kind of like Keanu Reeves. Again, I got 2 for 2. Can he go for a 3? We'll see. But yeah, it's just beautiful. It is. And then you add in the music, which is just extraordinary. As I mentioned in the introduction, they took sort of the uniqueness of Charlie Brown, and they took jazz, and they took a bit of modern flavor as well, and mix it all together. And it's just so good. So good. You know, I hate to use this word because, again, I'm not down with the kids nowadays. But the vibe was great. It was a great vibe. You know, it was one of those where, as I'm listening to the do 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 do, yeah, I butchered it, but you know the Charlie Brown theme tune. As that was going on, I'm sitting there going, I want to jig to this. This is pretty good, actually. This is pretty funky. And I like jazz, you know. So it was one of those where, you know, it's so extraordinary. And again, even when you get the modern music as well, it works in this setting. It doesn't feel like, oh, they just took a song because it was like top of the charts at that time, or it was popular. No, like they took a song that matched what was going on in the scene. And I don't know if the song, it's that song, I Feel Better When I'm Dancing, you know, that one. I don't know if it was made for this film, or it was just one that sort of was used for that scene. But again, it doesn't feel like it doesn't fit. Everything just works in this movie. And it goes back to what I said in the introduction of, like, if they said they wanted to do a movie, they wanted to make sure that it was faithful. This movie is faithful, and that is really my overall thought, is that it's funny, it's unique, it's special, but overall it is faithful. It's faithful to it's faithful to all the characters. The characters feel like they should. The characters look like they should. They sound great. You might have noticed I didn't actually mention any of the voice cast in the introduction. The reason for that is, as I was going through my notes, it didn't feel that important to mention the voice cast. For one, they were all little kids at the time, and you know, a lot of them aren't really working. Some of them are, none of them are nowadays. But the reason I didn't say it was just the fact of, it doesn't and it shouldn't matter, you know, who the voice work is, really. How can I explain it? To me, it's one of those of like the voices that they chose fitted the characters, and they all felt unique and they all felt special, that I didn't need to know who the voice actors were, if that makes sense. If that conveys what I'm trying to say, is the fact of I don't care who voices Charlie Brown. Whoever voiced Charlie Brown did a fantastic job. For anybody who is interested, though, the guy who voiced Charlie Brown was Noah Schnapp, who is he plays Will in Stranger Things. It is Will, isn't it, from Stranger Things? I think, yeah. Anyway, the kid from Stranger Things, he did the voice of Charlie Brown, but again, it doesn't sound like Charlie Brown. Sorry. How can I explain? Sorry, I've just messed myself up. What was I trying to say? Basically, he doesn't sound like that anymore. But from why he sounds in that movie, it's what I would imagine Charlie Brown to sound like. Basically, that's what I'm always trying to say. But I loved it. I did. I was just in awe all the way through. This is one of them films that it's a miracle to me that it is so underrated. And that can really be my overall sort of end sort of thought, really, is the fact of if you haven't watched it, please do yourself a favor and give it a go. Go into it and experience it for what it is and what it tries to do. If you've got kids, more than likely they will want to watch it and enjoy it as well. It's funny, it's silly, it's creative, it's different, it's unique, it's underrated, it is special, but most importantly, it is faithful. That is the most important point of it. And if you grew up with Snoopy, if you're American and you grew up with Snoopy and you grew up with Charlie Brown and you haven't seen it, you more than likely will probably really, really enjoy it. If you listen to this in the UK, again, as in the introduction, we didn't really have this character, this IP in the UK, but I feel like that is even better because it just shows you've got a great introduction. You've got nothing to kind of judge it to or judge it towards, or if it's better than this, if it's better than that, if it's better than the original sort of movies, whatever. We don't have that. So it's better for us because we can go in and say, I like it for what it is and for what it does, and that's good enough, you know? So yeah, I implore mostly people who are not familiar with this IP, with these characters, to go in and explore and enjoy the most. So yeah, that's my overall thoughts of like, just it's unique and go give it a go if you haven't. It's absolutely wonderful. Before we wrap things up, I want to do a bit of trivia because I do love my trivia, and I actually found quite a bit of interesting trivia that I wanted to share with you all. So let me just pull it up. So Snoopy's voice, Snoopy's noises, and Woodstock's chirpings are taken from and by Bill Mendes's performance from early Peanuts animated productions from 1965 to 2000s, including movies, TV series, and TV specials. Years later, the same technique was used in Tom and Jerry, the movie from 2021, which featured archive recordings of William Hanna, who did all of the original screeches, yells, gasps, shrieks, howls, and screams for Tom and Jerry in the original cartoons from 1942 to 1957. So you're probably wondering there, Luke, you already mentioned this in the introduction, but it was that special little USB. You notice that word I'm using, that special sort of thing? You know, it's prevalent because it's true. Be unique, be yourself, be special, be different. But it's that special little thing of like this same technique was used in the Tom and Jerry movie. I quite like the Tom and Jerry movie from 2021. Because of COVID, it was straight to streaming and not many people saw it. But it was a pretty fun film, pretty good. It wasn't fantastic, it wasn't perfect, not at all. But I liked it for what it was and what it is. And they took sort of archive recordings from William Hanna, who did all the original sort of voices, and put it into that film. And again, it was those moments where you heard the iconic screams and yowls and yelps is what made those characters feel like they should, feel unique. Again, like I said, it was that special little thing that made those so unique and so nostalgia of why they're so timeless and why we love them so much. So this one as well, but I really, really love. So the first full-length Peanuts film, this was like the first Peanuts film since the death of the creator, Charles M. Schulz, in 2000, but it was also the first theatre Peanuts movie in 35 years since Bon Voyage, Charlie Brown, and Don't Come Back from 1980. So there hasn't been enough. Before this, it was 35 years before the last Charlie Brown film from 1980. That's how long ago it's been since the last Peanuts movie. And again, there hasn't been one since, as far as I'm aware. And then finally, I found this bit of tidbit and I really, really liked it and I wanted to share it. So Charles Schulz wanted to call his comic strip Charlie Brown. It had started out as Good Old Charlie Brown, but the editors were worried about legal action from people who had that name. It started production as Little Folks, but because that was too similar to the title of someone else's strip, his syndicate forced the title Peanuts on him. He hated the title partly because it made people assume the character's name was Peanut and didn't use it in any of the specials or movies, which were titled Charlie Brown or Snoopy. This film is the first Peanuts feature to carry that title. So he never liked the name, didn't want to be associated with it, but this was the first film or first sort of project to actually have the name Peanuts in the title. Of course, not in the UK. In the UK, it is Snoopy and Charlie Brown. Because again, they're the most recognizable characters and the recognizable names, as I mentioned in the introduction. But I find it interesting how this was the first one that actually had the Peanuts title in it, the original title. And I would imagine that in America, you'd probably recognize both, but sort of internationally, the more recognizable would be Charlie Brown or Snoopy. But still, I found that bit really, really interesting. I wanted to share it with you all. But yeah, that is all she wrote. I've come to the end of my journey with the Peanuts movie, sadly. I can't remember what's next, actually. What is next? I think it's another Ice Age movie after this one. I think it's not Continental Drift. That was the last one. Actually, let me have a look quickly. Which one is... Right, so I've just had a look. And the next film is an Ice Age movie. It's July the 22nd, 2018. Ice Age Collision Course, the last Ice Age movie. And I don't remember this one that much. All I really remember from it is that somehow... So Neil deGrasse Tyson, is it? I think he's actually a possum, so it's Neil deGrasse Possum, I think. Or some sort of joke like that. And then somehow Scrat finds his way onto UFO and crashes into a meteor, and then a meteor is going to come down to Earth and just kill everybody. I think that's about right. It's been a while since I've watched it. I've said it many times, and I'm not going to beat that horse anymore because we'll get there when we get there. But yeah, generally, I feel like they went too far with this series. I love Ice Age, but they should have stopped at one. But the last movie, Continental Drift, did surprise me. It was definitely a return to form. I actually enjoyed it a lot more than Dawn of the Dinosaurs and Ice Age 2. So we'll see. I might like it. I might think it's good. I might see the bright spark in this leaking ice puddle. We'll see. But that is what's coming next in my Blue Skies Studios journey, Ice Age, Collision Course, and then after that it will be Ferdinand, which I don't think I've actually watched. But we're getting close. We really are getting close to the end of Blue Skies at this point. After Ice Age, it's only 2 more movies, and then that's it. And then they were bought by Disney, and then they went under. So yeah, it's going to be sad to say goodbye, but we'll see. These last 3 films might surprise us. It might not. But until then, thank you very, very much for listening to my review of Snoopy and Charlie Brown, aka the Peanuts movie. 3 things you can do for me before we wrap things up. If you listen to this on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Nerdstalgic_pod. And finally, if you listen to this on Spotify on your mobile phone, don't forget to leave a star rating. And so I've been your host, Luke the Human. You've been listening to the Nerdstalgic Podcast, and I will greatly see you very, very soon.